We're beginning a series on Romans. We'll be going through the book in detail. It is probably the most important book, at least in the sense of its impact on the history of Christianity. We could list off a number of people who look back to Romans for their salvation. Not just people we know, but historical figures like Augustine and Luther. And of course, Luther's understanding of Romans is what kind of began his thinking that led to the Reformation. So it's a very, very important book. There's a lot of meat in here. There's a lot of things that are unique about Romans. And we're going to spend 2 weeks, this week and next week, doing kind of an introduction, trying to get an understanding of what has gone into, or kind of a contextual background understanding of who wrote it, why, when. I have the questions: who, what, where, when, why, and how. So we'll go through those and look at all these things. And I would encourage you, whenever you do a book study, to spend some time doing that, getting an understanding of the background, because it really helps you understand the context of the passages when you're reading through. Why are they talking about this? Why does this matter? And if you have this background information, it can help a lot of times. So I encourage you to do that. So we're going to do that this week and next week. Who's teaching next? You're going next. And so you'll begin chapter 1, verse 1, and we're just going to go through the whole book. It's going to be fun. All right. So what we're going to do, a couple other things. Calvin's commentary on Romans. This is going to be, there's going to be several different teachers teaching like usual as we go through the book. And we'd like to have some kind of book to hold us together cohesively. So we picked Calvin's commentary on Romans. Calvin wrote a lot of commentary, almost the entire Bible. And he was still writing commentary as he died. And when you get to that section in the commentary, I forget which book it is. It's like Ezekiel or something. And it's like halfway through, and it says, basically, in my modern paraphrase, sorry, you died, this is all you get. So it's really sad, because I usually read Calvin's commentary when I'm studying at some point, and so it's sad when I go to read, and it's not there. Well, then I have to find something else. Calvin wrote this commentary. This was the first commentary he wrote to Romans. It's interesting that if you read another writing he did, the Institutes, which is basically Calvin's systematic theology, his expression of what the Bible teaches and how we should work that out practically in church development and things like that. It follows the sections in Romans kind of very close to the sections we see in the Institutes. And Calvin's added a lot more things into the Institutes than what Paul covers here, but there is a similar order, which is interesting. And Calvin had just finished writing the second edition of the Institutes, because he had several editions and he would add more stuff, and it got bigger and bigger. So he had just finished that, and he began his first commentary on Romans. That was it was published in 1540. And that was in French and Latin, because, why not? You can both. So published in both. There have been a lot of translations over the years, and if you go online, you can find a translation of Romans for free, or not a translation, but a commentary, Calvin's commentary for free by John Owen, who's the one that you'll probably find. Famous Puritan guy. He translated it in, let's see, when was that? 1849. So when that was written. So that's easier to read than Calvin's Latin or French version, unless you know Latin or French pretty well. And that's the version I have in my Bible study software when I'm reading the commentary. I have Owen's translation from 1849. There is a newer translation, this book. This was published by Mackenzie in 1960. So it's a much more modern version of English than 1849. 1849 is not hard to read. It's easier than King James, right? King James isn't all that hard. So Owen's translation's not too bad, but this one's even more modern. So I have this information if you want to order that. Okay, so anyway, I always like to plug the book, right? You guys can get the book. Some of us are book people like me. All right, let's jump into our questions then. Question 1: Who was the author of Romans? Paul. Okay. How do we know that? Chapter 1, verse 1. Very first word, right? Paul. And you guys probably know that there's a certain structure to epistles. In the beginning, you have this greeting and salutation, and it's basically this is who it's from, this is who it's to, and then there's kind of a thanksgiving or a praise that's given, and then the writer goes into the body, and then at the end there's greetings. So that's kind of the structure. So that's why we have here at the very beginning, the very first thing, is who it's from, Paul. Now some of the letters in the New Testament, there's some liberal theologians who want to say other people wrote certain things. This wasn't really written by Paul. This wasn't really written by Peter, etc. Oddly, Romans is not contested. There's only like 2 or 3 very modern liberal scholars from the 1900s sometime. I didn't look into it much. That was it. No other time in history has anyone ever questioned that this was written by Paul. So I thought that was interesting because usually there's some controversy somewhere. All right, so also number 1, who are the recipients of the letter? Anybody?
The church at Rome.
The church at Rome. Very good. And if we look at verse 7, we see, to all those in Rome who are loved by God and called to be saints. Now, in most of the letters, we have a very short 1 or maybe 2 sentence salutation where Paul says, hey, it's me and Timothy and me and somebody else, and we are writing this to you. And then it goes on to the letters too. But in this one, this is the longest of all of them. It's 6 verses.
Just 1 sentence.
And it's 1 sentence. It's very long. I'm not going to steal Nick's thunder when he gets there, but it's great.
Go for it. That's okay.
Take that.
It's so amazing.
No. Well, you guys are going to have to come back to that. Of course, you can read it anytime you want on your own. Okay,
Just not right now.
Verses 1 through 6. Paul kind of gets excited and goes on talking about salvation and the gospel of Christ. And then he says, to all those in Rome. Okay, so what about this church in Rome? At this time, Paul hadn't been there yet. We're going to see that later on. Paul had never been to Rome, so he didn't start the church there. So there's a lot of question. Well, how did this church get started? Who started the church? And the Roman Catholics will tell you that Peter started it, or that at least he got there at some point early and did a lot of work there at the church. But there's really not any historical evidence to that effect. So how did it get started? Nobody knows. Nobody knows how the church got started. The most common theory is that there were Jews at Pentecost. Remember Pentecost? In Acts, early chapters of Acts, when the Holy Spirit came and everyone was speaking in tongues, that was during Pentecost. And there were a lot of Jews from all around who were there in Jerusalem at that time. And that's why they were speaking in tongues, because they were speaking in everybody's native languages. And then after that period, all of those who had been converted, and there were at least 3,000 converted, they went back home, right? And so a group of those may have gone back to Rome and began the church there. Okay? It's one theory. We don't really know who began the church. If we flip to the end of Romans, we'll also see some of the recipients. As I mentioned a moment ago, at the end of a letter, you would say, greetings. Send my greetings to so-and-so. It's much like we have phone calls today with relatives out of state. I talk to my mother every week, and at the end of the call, she'll say, "Oh, well, give Michelle my love," or give the kids my love. And sometimes I do that. Maybe do you ever do that? No. She knows I have a hard time doing that. She's probably watching this right now. Anyway, so at the end of your call, say, send my love to so and so. So that's what Paul's doing here at the end of Romans in chapter 16. In verses 3 through 16, greet Prisca and Aquila, my fellow workers, and I'm not going to read the whole thing. Greet Mary, greet Ampliatus, greet those and those. And if you count up all the people there, there's 26 at least people in the list that Paul is sending greetings to. So it's not like he has no connection to this church of Rome. All right? Because, Rome was a huge center, right? In Rome. That was like the capital. And so a lot of people were going to Rome. A lot of people were coming back out of Rome. And he had met a lot of these people for another reason that we'll get to in a little bit. And so he knew a lot of people that were there. It is interesting that if Peter had been there at this time, Paul surely would have said, "Send my greetings to Peter." He doesn't. So it's very interesting too. All right, so one other thing about these recipients, and I mentioned it earlier, Paul had never been there before. All the other letters, Paul knew intimately who he was sending this letter to. He started the church. He knew the people. He knew what was going on. He's never been to this church. So that makes this very unique, right? And it's a very long letter, and there's a lot of correction and things in it, guidelines for them to be following, and yet he's never been there. He doesn't know these people. So it would have been interesting for them to receive this letter and be like, who's this guy think he is? Telling us all of this, right?
Do you think that's one reason for the longer than normal greeting, establishing who he is, his apostleship?
Possibly a reason for the longer greeting. Yeah, sure. As we'll see in a little bit, one of the reasons why he wrote this was to introduce himself.
And the guy's credentials.
Exactly. Okay. All right. Let's move on to question 2. What? And by what, I mean what are some of the themes? What is the content of the letter? And next week we're going to spend more time talking about the themes. I just want to throw a couple out right now. Number 1, first and foremost, the gospel message is the theme. The gospel message. This is a very long, very detailed, very well fleshed out explanation of justification by faith. Very well explained, very well argued, and that is a huge theme, justification by faith. There is another theme that speaks to this people that are calling themselves the church at Rome, this people made up of Jews and Gentiles. And there was a lot of struggle between the Jews and the Gentiles. And we'll talk about this more next week. But one of the reasons this happened was around 49 AD, Claudius was the emperor of Rome, and there were all these riots that were happening in Rome. Now, does anybody remember any riots happening in Acts? No?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah?
When the
Riots?
yeah, when
The silversmiths?
is this girl? Yeah, the silversmith.
Silversmiths, that was one.
Yeah.
And he would pick that one, because that one wasn't started by the Jews. But many of the other ones were started by the Jews. The Jews would get all up in arms because this Paul and these guys were preaching all this stuff against the law or against circumcision or whatever, and they would just have these riots and try and stone them and all this stuff. So Claudius was recorded as making this decree to get all the Jews out of Rome, because they keep starting all these riots on account of Christus. And nobody knows what Christus is or who Christus is. So a lot of historians think, well, maybe that is a reference to Christ and the Christians. It's because of Christ and the Christians, all these Jews are having these riots all the time, so just get them out of here. And if we were to flip over to Acts 18, verse 2, oh, it's in the other direction. Acts 18, verse 2, we see that Paul, he left Athens, went to Corinth, and he found a Jew named Aquila, a native of Pontus, recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla, because Claudius had commanded all the Jews to leave Rome. All right, so there's several places in Acts where we have a very clear date, and that's one. We know that happened in 49 AD. So a lot of the Jews got scattered out. And what happened was the Christians who weren't ever Jews, because there were Jews who were not Christians, there were Jews who were Christians, and then there were Gentiles who were Christians. The Gentiles who were Christians stayed in Rome, and they continued in the church. Okay, so all the Jews, Christian or not, had to leave. The Gentile Christians stayed in Rome, and they continued the church, continued to grow. Now, after Claudius died, which was around 54, Nero came to power, and then all the Jews started coming back in. So we had the Christians who were Gentiles in an established church in Rome, and now all these Jewish Christians were coming back, and the Gentiles were now in charge. Normally, the Jews were in charge, right? The Gentiles were kind of like, the second-class Christians who were, sure, begrudgingly will let you into our synagogue or whatever to worship. But here, it's the other way around. You've got these Gentile Christians who are in charge in all these churches, and then the Jews are coming in saying, hey, this is our religion. You guys are the newcomers, So there's a lot of conflict going on here, racial conflict, and so that's a big theme throughout Romans, we'll see. Okay, let me move on to where. Where was this written?
Well, he was in Jerusalem, wasn't he?
No, it was not in Jerusalem. He was on his way to Jerusalem.
Oh, okay.
But he wrote this from Corinth. And it's fun to trace this out. So first we'll look at some people. So let me flip to 2 Timothy chapter 4 and tell you about this guy. All right, 2 Timothy 4, verse 20. Okay, and again, this is at the end of the letter, so Paul is sending greetings. And he tells them, greet Priscilla and Aquila and the household of Onesiphorus. Erastus remained at Corinth, and I left Trophimus, who was ill, etc., etc., etc. So we know there's this guy named Erastus that worked with Paul, and he left him, Erastus, at Corinth. Okay. Now let's look up another guy, Gaius, in 1 Corinthians chapter 1. 1 Corinthians 1, verse 14. And he says, and he's talking about baptizing people there. And he says, I thank God that I baptized none of you except Crispus and Gaius, so that no one may say that you were baptized in my name. Okay, so there's a man here named Gaius that Paul baptized. And we know that he left Erastus there in Corinth as well. Okay, so now if we go back to Romans and we look at his final greetings, if we look at verse 23, he says, Gaius, who was host to me, and we know Gaius was a convert in Corinth, and to the whole church greets you. Erastus, the city treasurer, and our brother Quartus greet you. So both Gaius and Erastus are at Corinth. Okay? So Paul's probably at Corinth. There's another way we can figure out he was at Corinth. If we go back to 1 Corinthians and chapter 16, we're doing detective work here. 1 Corinthians 16 now. If we read all of the verses 1 through 7, we'll see that Paul is collecting money. Now concerning the collection for the saints, as I directed the churches of Galatia, so you also are to do. And in the end of verse 4, if it seems advisable that I should go also with the collection, they will accompany me. They're on their way to Jerusalem. which it says there in verse 3. And then in verse 5, I will visit you after passing through Macedonia, for I intend to pass through Macedonia, and perhaps I will stay with you or even spend the winter so that you may help me on my journey. Okay, I draw a map. Nobody giggle. Okay, so we have Judea over here. We have Galatia, Asia Minor up here. Okay. Then we have the Greece and Peninsula down here. Then we have Italy, which is the boot, right? This looks so bad. I'm gonna giggle at myself. Okay, then we have Spain down here. Okay. All right, then we have Africa down here. Okay.
What are you saying? The Mediterranean's closed off from the?
I don't know. That's not horrible. Okay, here's Jerusalem. Okay, here's Rome. This is the outside here. Okay, now it looks bad. Now it looks bad. I can't be a perfectionist though. Okay, so this is stuff over here. Okay. All right.
I know we're supposed to be taking this seriously, but this is very entertaining.
Okay, so this is Egypt is down here somewhere. All right. I'm trying to draw my map. Okay, now Corinth is here, and all those other churches are in this area. Ephesus, Philippi. Oh, actually, Philippi's up here. Or actually over here. All right, this is Philippi. Okay, but you don't care. And there's a bunch of churches over here. All right, now, and this is Spain over here. Okay.
Macedonia.
What's that?
Where's Macedonia?
Macedonia is right here.
All right, you just brought it up here, Tom.
Macedonia. Okay. That's recorded for all time on the internet now. Okay, so what we're saying, so Paul, he directed the churches of Galatia, which are over here, to make a collection. They're collecting money to send to Jerusalem because there was a need there. And Paul is always concerned with the Jewish believers accepting the Gentile believers. So part of his motivation is he'll get all these churches that he's planted and everything, all these believers who are Gentile, this big collection, and he'll deposit it to Jerusalem and say, the Gentile believers love you. You know? Just further increase the bond between them, because there's one people of God. All right, so the Galatian churches are gathering money. He's in this is Achaia area here, where Corinth is. And so he says that when I arrive, I will gather your gift along with all the other gifts that he's received after passing through Macedonia. Because sometimes he would sail over here and then come down. Other times he would go around. But anyway, so he would then go back to Jerusalem with the gift. Okay, that's the plan. That's the plan. All right, so now let's look at Romans 15.
Verse 25.
Yeah, 25 and 26 says, well, I'll start at 24. I hope to see you in passing as I go to Spain and to be helped on my journey there by you once I have enjoyed your company for a while. At present, however, I am going to Jerusalem bringing aid to the saints. Okay, so his plan was to go here, collect money, and then go to Jerusalem. And saying here now that in verse 26, Macedonia and Achaia have been pleased to make some contribution for the poor among the saints at Jerusalem. And so it's already happened at this point. So he's at Corinth. And we know he hasn't been arrested. As soon as he gets to Jerusalem, he gets arrested. So, anyway, so that's where he was at. Corinth. Any questions about that? All right. Next, when? When was it written? Well, we know it was after he met Aquila and Priscilla. We just read that a minute ago, right? In Acts 18. And that happened in 49. So now I have to make a timeline. All right. I'm just going to do numbers down here. Okay, so this was when he met Priscilla and Aquila. All right. I have to get my notes. Okay, 54 was when they started going back to Rome. The Jews go back to Rome. Okay, causing problems there in the church. All right. And if we flip back over into Acts chapter 19, Acts 19. Let me read 21 and 22. Now, after these events, this was that riot at Ephesus that Joe just pointed out to us with the silversmiths. And after these events, Paul resolved in the Spirit to pass through Macedonia and Achaia and go to Jerusalem. Okay, again, we're seeing what his plan was from another source. He's going to go through Macedonia and Achaia and then to Jerusalem. Okay? After I have been there, I must also see Rome. So again, it's talking about he wants to go to Rome. And after sending, and having sent into Macedonia 2 of his helpers, Timothy and Erastus, who we know he left there, he himself stayed in Asia for a while. His center of operations was Ephesus over here. And so he stayed there and he went and visited the churches and over here, and then he would come back to Ephesus. He was in Ephesus for 2 years. Okay, so now if we go and look at chapter 20, Acts chapter 20, verses 1 through 3. Now after the uproar ceased, Paul sent for the disciples, and after encouraging them, he said farewell and departed for Macedonia. Okay, he's finally leaving Ephesus. He sent ahead Erastus and Timothy, right? So he waited for a while, and now he's going over himself. He's following them after. And when he had gone through those regions and had given them much encouragement, he came to Greece. Because there were some other churches up here in Macedonia, Thessalonica and Philippi. So he visited and encouraged them. And then he came to Greece, which is the southern part down here, the Achaia. There he spent 3 months. And when a plot was made against him by the Jews, as he was about to set sail for Syria, he decided to return through Macedonia. Okay. People were always plotting to kill him. Okay, so, and this takes place at the end of his 3rd missionary journey. And we know that when he gets back to Jerusalem, he gets arrested. And that happens in 57. And it happened around Pentecost. Paul is arrested, and it was during the Pentecost festival. So, it was, he was there about 3 months. Okay, so we know that the letter was written right before this. So the letter was written in 57 from Corinth while he was there. Because he was there for 3 months, and then he went to Jerusalem. All right? Is that clear? Does that make sense?
Sure.
Is that kind of fun?
Yes.
Okay. Now, number 5, why? Why was it written? And obviously God wanted to write it, so that's not the answer I'm looking for. God wanted it to be Holy Scripture, right? God wanted it to be included in the canon. Okay, yes.
There's probably a lot of reasons.
There were a lot of reasons.
One you mentioned earlier, he felt like he had some concern that the Christian church would be a fellowship of Jews and Gentiles, and so
Exactly.
he wanted to address that issue. I think one of the other primary issues is he was so concerned about the oppressed in Jerusalem that he probably wanted to make Rome a supporting church of the board in Israel, what was going on there.
All right, there were racial tensions he was aware of, and he wanted to address those in the church. Also, he is interested in support, like Joe said, but I don't know that it's support.
I don't know that it's primary in his mind, but I think it's there.
Yeah, if we look at Romans chapter 15 again,
That's my chapter.
is that one you're going to be teaching on?
No, it's actually raised.
Oh, that's right, okay. Romans 15, verses 23 and 24,
Yeah.
he says, "But now, since I no longer have any room for work in these regions," he's talking about up here in this area, where he spent so much time, "and since I have longed for many years to come to you," okay, "I hope to see you in passing as I go to Spain, and to be helped on my journey there by you, once I have enjoyed your company for a while." Okay, so he's hoping, where does Paul want to go? He wants to go to Rome, but why? Well, that ends up happening, getting judged by the emperor. But what he's really trying to do is start new ministry. Let me read a few verses ahead before. Let me just read 17 through 19. "In Christ Jesus, then, I have reason to be proud of my work for God, for I will not venture to speak of anything except what Christ has accomplished through me, to bring the Gentiles to obedience by word and deed, by the power of signs and wonders, by the power of the Spirit of God, so that from Jerusalem," over here, "all the way around to Illyricum," which is basically over here, so everywhere in between Jerusalem and Illyricum, "I have fulfilled the ministry of the gospel of Christ. And thus, I make it my ambition to preach the gospel not where Christ has already been named, lest I build on someone else's foundation." And then let me skip down again to verse 24. "I hope to see you in passing as I go to Spain." All right, so Paul is seeing his ministry in all this area is done. He's done all the work that he needed to do. The churches are well enough established. He's got leaders in place, Timothy and Titus and Erastus and Apollos and all these people he's been building up. They've got it under control. He feels called to go start new churches in another area, and he wants to go to Spain. He sees this as the place he wants to go to get more stuff going. Now God may have other plans for him. And he finds out on the way back to Jerusalem that he's going to be arrested. The prophets, those with the gift of prophecy, tell him he's going to get arrested when he gets to Jerusalem. And he says, "Well, I have to go to Jerusalem." That's what God wants. All right. So he does eventually get to Rome, but he's in chains when he gets there. Okay, so another theme then is he wants possibly Rome, because he's asking Rome to support him in his ministry to Spain. He's probably wanting Spain to be, or Rome to be his new base of operations. Ephesus was his previous point, his base, and he would go out from all around and then come back. And he had support from several of the churches in his ministry. They would give him money so that he could do this, but he also didn't ask for money much because he was a tent maker. He wanted them to not think he was out to steal their money. But he's telling the church at Rome, "Hey, I need your support so I can begin a new ministry over here in Spain." So one of his reasons is to get their support. Okay, and the other reason is since he's wanting to get their support, another reason why he wrote this letter was because he needed to introduce himself. They didn't know him. I mean, at least 26 people did. But the churches as a whole there in Rome didn't know him, so he needed to introduce himself.
Well, there's some indication that he'd already been introduced by some rumor mongers in Romans 3:8. He had a reputation for some bad doctrine, and of course he straightens that out.
Right. Paul did have a reputation everywhere. And remember, when this happened, when the Jews had to leave Rome, they went all around, and that's where Paul met, probably. A lot of these guys who ended up going back, that he knew, oh, you guys are going back to Rome. The exile's ended, you guys can go back. I mean, so he knew a lot of those people. And all those people would have known about all the riots and all the controversy and everything else going back. So it's hard being famous. And there was another reason. If we read the very beginning verses of Romans 16, I commend to you our sister Phoebe, a servant of the church at Cenchrea. All right, where's Cenchrea? It's right here.
No, but I'm sure you're going to show us.
It's right there. It's basically between Corinth and the sea. So it was almost like a suburb. It was there right on the sea. Corinth was kind of around it. You know, it's like Pinellas County. There are no real cities here. It's one big city. All right? You never have this little space in between. So Cenchrea was right there. So another evidence Paul is writing from Corinth, because he's sending, Phoebe comes to him and says, hey, I'm going to Rome. I'm going to move there. It was great knowing all you guys and everything. And Paul's like, you're going to Rome? Let me write a letter. Because I want to go to Rome, and I want them to know I'm coming and what I'm about. And as far as we know, no apostle had been to Rome yet. No apostle had been there to teach them the true gospel. And so that's why Paul is taking all these great pains to lay out his understanding of the gospel to them, and the unity of the people, and all these things that he's heard about. And so Phoebe was on her way. That's another reason. So he could just send a letter with her. So all these things are kind of going around, reasons why he wants to send this letter. Okay, any questions? Okay.
It was kind of back to the part of, kind of, so isn't that when he started meeting Christians on?
Well,
Was that during that time or?
yeah, there were several periods of time when Christians were persecuted and put in the theater, the Colosseum, to be killed by wild beasts. Yes. That did happen. That's right. You got to feed the lions somehow, I guess. All right, next week, we're going to talk about the how. We did who, what, where, when, why today. And so next week we're going to talk about how. How did Paul organize the letter? What is the outline? What are the themes in more detail? And also, Paul uses some very specific ways of reasoning in the letter that can be confusing sometimes. So we'll talk about that style of argumentation so that when we come to it, it makes sense. So we're going to talk about how Paul put together the letter next week. So it's going to be good. All right, I'm going to ask Rick to close us out in prayer as we head over to worship.
Let's pray. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for the beauty of your word, the gift of your word. We're thankful today to hear some detail about the Epistle of Romans, and it's inspiring, oh God, to hear how you use the Apostle Paul and all his journeys and the purposes and the goals that you had in mind when you inspired him to write this. Father, we pray for the same inspiration upon our heart as we head into worship, that you would inspire us to worship well great energy and anticipation as we head over. So, Father, we thank you for this conference. In Christ's name.